like to share with you an essay called The Honor of Work by Charles Peguy. This is from a book that is called The Basic Verities, which is a collection, of various prose and poetry of this Frenchman. He was born in 1873 and he died in World War I in 1914. Not going to give you more background. Other than to say, you're going to see he doesn't mince words. He's a very powerful writer. He has very strong opinions. You might find that sometimes he overstates things, but in any case, he certainly invites you to think about some very basic things in this little essay called The Honor of Work. We have touched bygone France, and we have known her unimpaired. We have been her children. We will try, if we can, to present this. The world has changed less since Jesus Christ than it has in the last 30 years. This is written in 1913. There was the age of antiquity and of the Bible. There was the Christian age. There was the modern age. Even after the war, and he's referring to a war of 1870, a farm in the Beauce country resembled a farm of the Gallo-Roman age infinitely more than this same farm resembles itself today in 1913. Or rather, this farm was like its Gallo-Roman self as far as customs, regulations, seriousness, gravity, in structure itself, in institution, and in dignity. And even at bottom, it was close to a farm of the time of Xenophon. We will try to explain this. We have known the time when, if a simple woman uttered a word, it was her race itself, her being, her people which spoke, which came out. And when a workman lit his cigarette, what he was about to tell you was not what a journalist had said in that morning's paper. The freethinkers of that time were more Christian than are our devout people of today. An average parish of that time was infinitely closer to a 15th century parish, or one of the 4th century, or let us say one of the 5th or 8th centuries, than to our present day parishes. Believe it if you can, we were fostered among a gay people. In those days, a workyard was a spot on earth where men were happy. Today, a workyard is a spot on earth where men find fault, wish each other ill, fight, kill each other. In my day, everybody sang, myself excepted, but I was already unworthy to belong to those times. In most of the corporations, one sang. Today, one balks. In those days, one earned scarcely anything, so to speak. No one has any idea how low salaries were, and yet everyone had enough grub. In the humblest cottages reigned a sort of ease, the memory of which is lost. At bottom, no one reckoned, and there was nothing to reckon about. And children could be reared, and they were reared. This atrocious economic strangulation, which year by year tightens its grip on us, did not exist. One earned nothing, one spent nothing, and everybody lived. The economic strangulation of today, that scientific, cold, rectangular, regular, clean, clear-cut, seamless, implacable, wise, common, constant, convenient as a virtue strangulation. That strangulation where there is nothing to be said and where the strangled one is so obviously in the wrong did not exist. We will never know the true extent of the decency and truthfulness of this people's soul. Such delicacy, such deep culture will never more be found, nor such a delicacy and cautiousness of speech. The people of those days would have blushed for our best tone of today, which is the bourgeois tone. And today everyone is bourgeois. Can we be believed? And once more, this amounts to the same. We have known workmen who really wanted to work. No one thought of anything but work. We have known workmen who in the morning thought of nothing but work. They got up in the morning, and at what an hour! And they sang at the idea that they were off to work. At 11 o'clock, they sang on going off to eat their soup. Work for them was joy itself and the deep root of their being and the reason of their being. There was an incredible honor in work, the most beautiful of all the honors, the most Christian, perhaps the only one which stands of itself. That is why I say, for example, that a free thinker of those days was more Christian than a devout person of our day. Because nowadays a devout person is perforce a bourgeois, and today everyone is bourgeois. We have known an honor of work exactly similar to that which in the Middle Ages ruled hand and heart. The same honor had been preserved, intact underneath. We have known this care carried to perfection, a perfect whole, perfect to the last infinitesimal detail. We have known this devotion to l'ouvrage bien fait, to the good job, carried and maintained to its most exacting claims. During all my childhood, I saw chairs being caned exactly in the same spirit, with the same hand and heart as those with which these same people fashioned its cathedrals. Today, what remains of all this? How has the most laborious people on earth, and perhaps the only laborious people on earth, perhaps the only people that loved work for work's sake and for honor, or in a word, just loved to work, been changed into this people of saboteurs? How has this people been transformed into one which in the workyard takes the greatest pains not to lift a hand? In history, this will be one of the greatest victories, and doubtless the only one of the intellectual bourgeois demagogy. But we must admit that it counts, this victory. There was the Christian Revolution, and there was the modern revolution. These are the two revolutions that we must count. In my day, an artisan was an artisan belonging to any Christian time, and doubtless to any time in antiquity. Today, an artisan is no longer an artisan. Toward this fine honor of a trade converged all the finest, all the most noble sentiments, dignity, pride. Never ask anything of anyone, they used to say. These are the ideas in which we were brought up, for to ask for work was not to ask. The most normal, most natural thing in the world to claim, not even to claim, was to take one's place in a workroom, in a working city, quietly to take one's place before the work which awaited one. In those days, a workman did not know what it was to solicit. It is the bourgeoisie who solicit. It is the bourgeoisie who, turning the workmen into bourgeois, have taught them to solicit. Today, in this same insolence and in this brutality, in the sort of incoherence which they bring into their demands, it is very easy to sense this hidden shame of being forced to ask, of having been brought by the new laws of economic history to solicit. Oh yes, they ask something of someone nowadays. They even ask everything of everyone. To exact is still to ask. It is still to serve. Those bygone workmen did not serve, they worked. They had an absolute honor, which is honor proper. A chair rung had to be well made. That was an understood thing. That was the first thing. It wasn't that the chair rung had to be well made for the salary or an account of the salary. It wasn't that it was well made for the boss, nor for connoisseurs, nor for the boss's clients. It had to be well made itself, in itself, for itself, in its very self. A tradition coming, springing from deep within the race, a history, an absolute, an honor, demanded that this chair rung be well made. Every part of the chair which could not be seen was just as perfectly made as the parts which could be seen. This was the selfsame principle of cathedrals. And once again, it is I who seek out these lengthy reasons, I who have degenerated. For them, In their homes, there was not the shadow of a doubt. The work was there. One worked well. There was no question of being seen or of not being seen. It was the innate being of work which needed to be well done. And there was an incredibly deep feeling of what we now call the honor of sport, but which in those days flourished everywhere. Not only the idea of producing the best, but in the best, the idea of producing the most. Not only to vie as to who could do the best, but also as to who could do the most, was the fine, uninterrupted sport of every hour, which penetrated all of life, was woven into it. A bottomless disgust for bad workmanship, a more than lordly contempt for him who worked badly. But that idea didn't even occur to them. All the honors converged toward that honor, a decency and a delicacy of speech, a respect for home, a sense of respects, of all the respects, of respect itself, a constant ceremony, as it were. Besides, home was still very often identified with the workroom, and the honor of home and the honor of the workroom were the same honor. It was the honor of the same place. It was the honor of the same hearth. What has become of all this? Everything was a rhythm and a rite, R-I-T-E, a rite and a ceremony from the moment of rising in the early morning. Everything was an event, a sacred event. Everything was a tradition, a lesson. Everything was bequeathed. Everything was a most saintly habit. Everything was an inner elevation and a prayer. All day long, sleep and wake, work and short rest, bed and board, soup and beef, house and garden, door and street, courtyard and threshold, and the plates on the table. Laughing, they used to say, and that to annoy the priests, that to work is to pray, and little did they know how true that was. So much of their work was a prayer, and the workroom an oratory. Everything was the long event of a beautiful rite. These workmen would have been much surprised, and what would have been not even their disgust, their incredulity, if they had been told that a few years later in the workyards, the workmen, the journeymen, would officially propose to do as little as possible, and that they would consider this a great victory. Such an idea, supposing that they could conceive of such a thing, would have struck directly at them, at their being. It would have been a doubt cast upon their capacity, for it would have inferred that they did not do as much as they could. It's like supposing of a soldier that he will not be victorious. They, too, lived in a perpetual victory. But what a victory! How much the same and yet how different. A victory every hour of the day, every day of life, an honor equal to no matter what military honor. The self-same sentiments of the Imperial Guard. And successively or together, all the beautiful adjoining or connected sentiments, all the beautiful sentiments derived or filial. A respect for the aged, for parents, for kinship. An admirable respect for children. Naturally, a respect for womanhood. And it must be said, since today this is so sadly lacking, a respect of woman herself for womanhood. A respect for family, a respect for home, and above all, an innate feeling for respect and a respect for respect itself. Respect for the tool and for the hand, that supreme tool. My hand loses its cunning, the old men used to say, and that was the end of everything. The idea that anyone could purposely damage his tool would not even have appeared to them the ultimate sacrilege. It would not even have appeared to them as the crowning madness. It would not have appeared to them as a monstrous crime. To them, it would have appeared the most extravagant of assumptions. It would have been as though someone had suggested their cutting off a hand. A tool was merely a longer or harder hand, steel nails, or one more specially affected, a hand which you yourself had made expressly for this or that purpose. A workman who damaged a tool would have been to them like a conscript who during a war cuts off his thumb. You earned nothing, you lived on nothing, you were happy. The question here has nothing to do with enlarging upon social arithmetic. It is a fact, one of the rare facts which we know, which we have been able to embrace, one of the rare facts to which we can bear witness, one of the rare facts which are unquestionable. One cannot imagine what the health of the race was then. Above all that, good humor, general, constant, that atmosphere of good humor. Obviously, one didn't yet live in equality. One didn't even think of equality. I mean of social equality. A common inequality, commonly accepted, a general inequality, an order, a hierarchy which appeared natural because it only meant the different levels of a common happiness. Nowadays, nothing is spoken of but equality. And we live in the most monstrous economic inequality that has ever been seen in the history of the world. In those days, one lived. One had children. Then no one had the impression that we have of living in penal servitude. No one had then, as we have now, the impression of economic strangulation, of an iron collar tightening around the throat, each day a little tighter. No one then had invented that admirable mechanism of the modern strike, in an unbroken stream which always makes salaries rise by a third and the cost of living by a good half, and the resulting destitution caused by the difference between the two levels. Note that, at bottom, it doesn't amuse workmen today to do nothing in the workyards. They would prefer to work. It is not in vain that they belong to a laborious race. They hear the call of this race. The hand that itches, that wants to work, the arm that is bored with nothing to do, the blood that courses through the veins, the head that seethes, and which, with a sort of anticipated covetousness, by a sort of preemption, by a real anticipation, seizes ahead of time the finished work. Like their fathers, they hear the muffled call of work that wishes to be done. And at bottom, they are disgusted with themselves for damaging their tools. But there you are, highly respectable gentlemen, the scholars, the bourgeois, have explained to them that this was socialism and that this was the revolution. Charles Peguy, The Honor of Work.